Puerto Rico's Governor Ricardo Rosselló has confirmed his nomination for the Secretary of State on his Twitter page. Pedro Pierluisi is a former congressional representative for Puerto Rico. He has been chosen to serve the position following the resignation of Luis Rivera Marin. If confirmed before Friday, Pierluisi will become the next governor of Puerto Rico.
Governor Rosselló will resign that day after almost 2 weeks of protests on the island. But there are fears that Pierluisi won't have enough votes from the Senate to secure his confirmation. Protesters also vowed to continue demonstrations if they are not happy with the nomination. So here to talk more about this announcement is CBS This Morning lead national correspondent David Begnaud. David, I heard the news and I thought, is this guy even going to make it to the governor's mansion? Because it certainly seems like anyone who's kind of in Rosselló's orbit is not liked by the people. Do they like him?
Well, let me tell you this. From the people I've heard from on social media alone, hundreds, close to 1,000, they have said Pierluisi is the best of the worst. Doesn't mean he's a bad man, but when you stack him up against the others who are under consideration, they'll take him. We actually did a Twitter poll. I think we have the poll to pop on the screen. Of roughly 7,000 people who voted in our Twitter poll, look at this. Pierluisi, compared to Wanda Vasquez and Thomas Rivera Schatz, has, do we have the numbers on here, guys?
Okay, they don't have the numbers. What did your poll?
89% for Pierluisi.
All right.
Now, who's Tomás Rivera Schatz? He's the president of the Senate. Who's Wanda Vasquez? She's the Justice Secretary.
Who doesn't want the job.
Correct. So here's how it lays out, and it's a telenovela of politics, so follow it here. Pierluisi ran against Ricardo Rosselló and lost in the primary. Now Ricardo Rosselló wants to put him in the Secretary of State job. He's got to be confirmed by both houses of the legislature. As of me talking to you right now, he does not have the votes. He's got to get the votes by Friday at 5 p.m. What happens if he doesn't get them? That means the next in line is Wanda Vasquez, the Justice Secretary. She says, I don't want it. But her spokeswoman said if she has to take it, she'll do it. Okay? And then there's Tomás Rivera Schatz, the head of the Senate. All reports are he is jockeying and desperately wants the job. He put out a statement this morning saying we will follow the rule of law, whatever. He is an exceptionally controversial individual who, if he were to sort of use the power he has in the legislature, he could try and prevent Pierluisi from getting in there and try and get Wanda Vasquez out if she ends up becoming governor. You follow?
Yes. In fact, I was going to ask you that question because my follow-up question was going to be, how come he doesn't have the votes in the legislature? Right. But part of the reason may be that the person who's in charge doesn't want him to have the votes.
Bingo. And remember, Rosselló's statehood party. In politics, the parties are divided not by left and right, but by statehood and commonwealth, right? And the majority in both the House and the Senate is the statehood party of Rosselló, right? So they're the ones wielding the influence right now.
Why wasn't he able to beat Rosselló in the primary?
Listen, Rosselló won by less than 45% of the vote, 640 some odd thousand, okay? Rosselló is the son of a former governor, grew up in the governor's mansion. There's a picture of him with his tennis racket sitting in a chair when daddy was governor, right?
Wow.
But Rosselló won the vote against Pierluisi, and it was surprising to some because Mr. Pierluisi had been a representative in Congress, had sort of spent a lot of time in politics, but was defeated by this newcomer Rosselló, who had really no political experience, but won.
That's so fascinating. The other story that you've been covering, David, and you have covered this going back to when you first got on the ground, even before Hurricane Maria landed, is these water bottles. And I noticed on your social media feeds that you've been pushing to understand why these water bottles that we're showing on our screen here were found again in Dorado, Puerto Rico. You've been reaching out to FEMA. You've been reaching out to the company who provides these water bottles. What's going on?
We should remind people. 2 years old.
I know.
Been sitting there for what, 2 years?
Well, so here's the thing. I talked to both FEMA and the company that's been hired to process it. This video came from a man who follows me on social media who, when I posted it, said, I'm going to go out there and show you what is on the ground right now. So this is the newest video you are looking at right now, okay? Here's what we found out. FEMA says water has an expiration date and that when they buy it, the company puts a certain date. When it's close to that expiration date, they either buy it, they either sell it, they give it away, or they hire somebody to come in and dispose of it. They say they couldn't find anybody to give it to, and they couldn't find anybody to buy it. So they hired a company in Bayamón, Puerto Rico, to dispose of the water. This is what the reason people are so upset about this is because there were people who were so desperate to get water after the storm, right? And so they're calling this surplus because FEMA said they have had a lot left over, right? I'm just telling you what FEMA says. I talked to the man who won a $400,000 contract to dispose of the water. He said, I said, when are you going to finish disposing it? He said, I can't even tell you, it's going to be such a long time. Here's what they're doing with the water. They're using it to irrigate the field, and they're going to recycle the bottles and send them out of Puerto Rico because you can't do the recycling on the island. A lot of people are upset because just the image of water bottles sitting there harkens back to Maria when so many people needed
desperate.
Water.
Yeah. What I also appreciate about what you're doing is you've got thousands of people that follow you on social media, and the fact that this rose to the heights of your Twitter feed where you're, or wherever it came to you from, where somebody is really following your reporting and appreciates what you do, and they know that by sending it to you, they're going to get an answer as to what's going on. And that's exactly what you did.
Yeah, look,
it's a new paradigm that we're living in terms of journalism.
Yeah,
I think it's really interesting.
It really is, and as much as we criticize social media, a lot of times social media helps sort of put things on our radar that we didn't know about otherwise. So you can kind of ask some more questions. And this was one example where FEMA did not withhold information. They got back to me pretty quick. Now, you may not like what we're hearing from FEMA, but that's the official word, and the water bottles will be there, I'm told, for months because it's taking them a while to dispose of them. And by the way, the tens of thousands that are there, there's tens of thousands more at an airport in Ceiba on the eastern side of the island, which still have not been disposed of. We are talking about millions and millions of bottles of water that will have not been used.
Can I just ask you, we're about to hit hurricane season.
Yes.
Could they, I know that there's an expiration date, but I wonder, the fact that they're there, there's a surplus, they say, could that at all be used if Puerto Rico should find themselves in dire straits again?
But maybe to wash or whatever.
Correct, and it's the expiration date that FEMA is saying they're obligated to sort of, once they get close to that, they have to dispose of it. To the point of hurricane season, there is a tropical sort of disturbance in the area, which Jeff Baradelli, one of our weather contributors, told me this morning they're monitoring. I don't think it's going to cause major issues, but it's something that Puerto Rico, by the way, should be on guard and should be keeping an eye on for next week. FEMA told us that the reason they got rid of these water bottles is because it was costing a lot of money to house them. And that's why they started putting them on the airport property in the fields where people could finally see it, right? Instead of in the warehouses, FEMA said we don't pay hundred thousands, so put them in the field, and people would drive by and go, you got to be kidding me. These water bottles are just sitting here? So that's the backstory behind the water bottles.
Really fascinating.
It really is.
Thank you
but it certainly
much.
seems like something's really inefficient about the system, and it needs to be corrected.
Yeah.
Man, David.
Thank you very much, David.
Thank
As
you.
always, appreciate it.